Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad, bringing you the podcast Capitalism Hits Home, a podcast about the mutual shaping and interpenetrations of our economic system, our politics, and our personal lives in the United States. Today, I want to talk about the Trump program for women. I have deduced that program, which if one looks, it's obvious, but I'm looking at it and I see it clearly and want to share that with you. Feminism is the radical proposition that women are fully human beings. That is a premise that the Trump administration does not share. Because one of the bases of being a human being is some kind of bodily integrity. Your body is yours. Trump has been legally found guilty of sexual assault in the case of E. Jean Carroll and has 25 sexual assault allegations against him. In the famous talk that Trump made with Billy Bush on Access Hollywood, Trump was making a cameo appearance on that program, and he says, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. And Billy Bush says, anything? Anything you want? He says, yeah. Grab him by the pussy. You can do anything. Wow. Rather disrespectful. Trump's romantic partner of the moment, Elon Musk, the unelected, very active vice president, is facing accusations by 8 women in his workplace, SpaceX. They accuse him of an environment with virulent sexism, with sexist talk, with sexual harassment, with lewd photographs, and with memes mocking women and the LGBTQIA community. Those 8 women who accused Musk of these crimes were fired. All of them are fired. Matt Gaetz, Trump's first pick for the Justice Department, who's now withdrawn because of the ethics report on him in Congress, is accused of sex trafficking of a minor across state lines. His partner in that crime is already serving in jail. Pete Hegseth, who is now our Defense Department secretary, was accused by a woman of lacing her drink and then raping her. That was settled with the financial settlement, and the sum is not disclosed. He's also accused of creating a drunken, lecherous environment at the 2 veterans organizations that he headed, small right-wing veterans associations, which he bankrupted and which had celebrations of their organizations at strip clubs and other demeaning venues for women. RFK, who is now our Health and Human Services Secretary, apologized for having sexually assaulted his underage babysitter. Linda McMahon, who co-headed the World Wrestling Entertainment Center, is accused of enabling sex abuse of the teenage ring boys that helped in wrestling and were routinely raped by a man in their organization, in the World Wrestling Entertainment Federation. Trump was a frequent flyer on the Lolita Express, run by Jeffrey Epstein, that took them to Slave Island, where they got a chance to rape underage girls. Therefore, we have evidence that Trump is guilty of utter disrespect of the bodily integrity of women. Vice President J.D. Vance, who is still elected vice president, even though Musk acts like an active vice president, sees the purpose of women's lives as either producing children or taking care of them. In his words, the whole purpose of the post-menopausal female is to help raise children. And he accuses Democrats of being the Democratic Party is run by corporate oligarchs and a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable in their lives and the choices they've made, and they want to make the rest of the country miserable too, end quote. He sees women as breeders, and he sees the fall in the birth rate as a civilizational crisis, and advocated that women who don't have children should be taxed, adults without children should pay higher taxes and have fewer voting rights. This is the opposite of viewing women as full human beings with a whole range of opportunities across them. Trump and his misogynist retinue will try to deny women every human right and deny men who are childless of the right to have a reasonable tax rate. Now, why? Why were they elected? What's happening? Well, what's happening is the crisis in personal life that I've addressed on this podcast. Between 1820 and the 1970s, America became the richest country in the world, in which we were the world's manufacturer, particularly after World War II, when all the other advanced economies were destroyed and China was just emerging from a civil war and a revolution, and was one of the most backward, poorest countries in the world at that time. At that time in the United States, every generation of white families did better than the previous generation. Men won family wages. People who were black collar had their children work at white collar jobs. People who were white collar had a chance to have their children have professional jobs. And men got, as I've said before, the wages that supported dependent wives and children if they were white. And until the mid-70s, at least 70% of America was white. White women's survival was based on attracting men. We were supposed to be attractive, attract husbands who then supported us for life while we brought up their children, connected them to their friends, relatives, and children, took care of their emotional lives, as they were taught not to have vulnerable emotions, but they were somehow possible with a sexual partner, gave them sexual access, and also socially connected them with friends. Whole bunch of unpaid labor that was devalued but expected. Black women created family and community supports that weren't as dependent on marriage, because black men didn't have the family wages that would support that. When a man went to work, he went fed by his wife's cooking, in clean clothes, washed and maybe pressed by his wife, and returned to a home that was clean and orderly, and children created with the labor of his wife, because that's what was expected of a wife. And the overwhelming majority of white women were married. Well, as I've said before, that changed because of capitalist greed. When capitalists abandoned the American manufacturing workforce for cheaper wages in places like India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Instead of paying $25 an hour, they got away with between $1 and $3.10 an hour. What a bonanza. And they took that money, those billions, back to the United States, changing it from what was the most egalitarian nation in the developed world in 1970 to the least egalitarian nation in the world, which is what it is today. America counted on women as the social support network that kept people reasonably content, clean, well-fed through their unpaid labor and their support in a home. Now, the majority of women are single, and American women are on a birth strike. American women don't have enough children to reproduce our labor force, which is rather serious since we're kicking out immigrants who always provided America's workforce. Now, you have two choices when you have a reduced future workforce. You can either do what Sweden, France, and the Scandinavian countries have done, which is to provide universal quality childcare, university quality healthcare, maternity leaves, paternity leaves, family vacations that are paid, benefits for single parents, clothing allowances for children, and all sorts of equalizers. Sweden and France provide all those things. Even Brazil provides 6 weeks of paid family vacation time, or paid vacation time, so that people can have time with their families. And in France, there's a law that you cannot contact any employee after half an hour after work is over. So you can't try to access their labor through your cell phone at night. They all also have free tuition for college. Very different. And both France and the Scandinavian countries boosted their birth rate when they gave those benefits to parents. As one example, every other country in the world, except for 5 countries, gives paid maternity leaves. And those 5 countries are poor little countries: Papua New Guinea, Swaziland, Somalia, some Pacific islands, and the United States. And so, of course, our birth rate is plummeting. And they are trying to punish us to increase that. I don't think it'll work. They're also trying to increase marriages through threats. That won't work either, because the social conditions and the economic conditions of those things have disappeared. Trump's program has been tried. It was tried in Nazi Germany and Nazi Italy. The Nazis defined women's jobs as Kirche, Küche, and Kinder. Kitchen, church, and children. Those were women's natural, in quotes, pastimes. That enabled women to get very poor salaries, because after all, this is their real mission. But they still had to work in the munitions factories and keep the factories going when the men were drafted. The Nazis abolished abortion first, and then birth control. But women still didn't have children. They were so depleted and exhausted. There weren't that many men around, but there were some, and the birth rate did not climb. In fact, it fell because women were too exhausted to work jobs at low pay outside the home and do all the work in the home, including the very labor-intensive labor of bringing up children. So what do we do about this? Well, there are clear indications of what to do. We have to join together. One of the first jobs of fascism is to separate people, and by separating men and women, you divide the population in half. And then separating out gay people, disabled people, all of these were tried by the Nazis, disabled people, trans people, and creating people to pick on so that people's hatred of being economically and socially deprived can be directed at these other people, dividing the workforce. Well, what people have done about it is very clear. Abortion rights were won in two overwhelmingly Catholic countries, Argentina and Ireland. And in the case of Argentina, the Pope himself, who's Argentinian, visited Argentina to push them to vote against eliminating abortion, against abortion rights. And the reason they won abortion rights in that very Catholic country is that the feminist movement joined with a progressive labor movement, with the indigenous peoples movement, with the gay and sexual rights movements, and the climate movement. And together, they won, because together, we are the overwhelming majority. And that's why abortion rights were won in Ireland, in Argentina, and that's why socialist governments were won in Colombia and in Chile, as well as in Brazil, because all of those people joined together. Their left was not monitoring each other's transgressions in terms of slips of the tongue and microaggressions. They were uniting against fascism. That's what we have to do. And if we unite under a socialist banner, we can allocate the resources of our rich country to create justice and kindness for all people together. As long as we're not together, we will lose. They have the money. We have the labor force that keeps everything going. But we have to unite in order to do so. Sean Fain, the progressive labor leader of the UAW, United Auto Workers, wants a general strike in May 2028. I hope we can have that. Because if we withhold our labor, nothing works. But we have to unite under a socialist banner to have the funds to fund all of us and to create justice together. Thank you. Goodbye for now.